Why do we listen to lawyers? Why do we actually listen, believe whatever they say? Because I think at least some of the time, if not most of the time, they're just blatantly lying. I mean, I was listening to this thing about this case between two doctors. They're having a divorce, and one said that she poured Drano into his cup, which is true. She did. And the lawyer was saying that, oh yeah, she was doing that for, well, whatever reason, made up some excuse. But basically, the guy had stomach ulcers. He had, esophagitis, which is inflammation of the esophagus. And the lawyer said, well, that's due to heartburn or reflux. That's wrong. You don't get gastric ulcers from heartburn. That's just wrong. That's the thing about authority or listening to people, right? Nowadays, if you think about credibility, why do you listen to, say, me versus somebody else? How do you know somebody knows something versus doesn't? There's this whole talk about ChatGPT and how it's going to change the world. I think to a large part it did, because it provides information. It's written well, I presume, and most people don't know anything anyways, right? I feel a really interesting thing is Elon Musk is trying to come up with something called Truth GPT. He's into free speech, all this stuff. I don't know what that's going to be. I don't know. I don't think it matters, right? Most of the stuff, what he says, doesn't actually materialize. But I think it's very interesting because Google and many other search engines have turned away from correctness or validity into relevance. And now to salience, right? Relevance and salience, they're sort of about the same thing, but relevant to you, important to the world nowadays, right? In the olden days, if you looked at search engines, they actually search for terms that you put in, but Google now decides to ignore most of my terms, saying, hey, you're wrong. Oh, that doesn't matter. You want this, right? And no, I actually don't. Google doesn't know what I want. No matter how hard it tries, it doesn't know what I'm looking for because it can't read my mind. And the thing is, if I tell it to look for something, it doesn't care what I want. It cares what it thinks the average person wants, which may or may not be me, which is probably not me, right? And I think that's the whole thing about why do we listen to certain people? Why do we look at search engine results? Because they're what we got. Why do newspapers report on what the lawyer says? Because that's what they got, right? Just because it's what you got doesn't mean it's correct, right? You can go into the hardware store. Remember I went to Lowe's a while back, and you're looking for a certain part. And I remember there's this guy dressed in a kilt. He's a really knowledgeable guy, wonderful, helped me a lot, right, looking for my stuff. And he's helping some other people. They're like, people who go there often. I think they're city workers or something. They need to fix stuff. And he was saying, oh, yeah, you're looking for 106. I only have 105. They're like, that's pretty close. He's like, close doesn't count, except for nuclear bombs, hand grenades, and I forgot what else. But anyways, the whole point is, it's not close. It's just wrong. If the part doesn't fit, it's the wrong part. You're not going to be able to make it fit. I think that's the interesting thing with sort of authority, listening to people. Do people think critically still? Do they look back and say, does that actually make sense? I've been reading some reviews online looking at water filters, and some of these are just simply wrong. You look at the material, you're like, you got your details wrong. Does that matter? Does it not? I would say, well, maybe it doesn't. Maybe some other stuff is right, but I don't have time to look through all this stuff to remember what's right, what's wrong. If I already knew that, I wouldn't be looking at this review in the first place. But I just use that as a gauge of judging whether it's right or wrong and just say, okay, wrong information, just write it off, skip that site.